Welcome to Behind the Knowledge, a best hour podcast where we dive deep into the lives and stories of inspiring coaches from all walks of life. The two hosts of this show are me, Pat Barber, and my good friend and fellow coach, Todd Acuto. Each week, we'll sit down with the most amazing coaches we can find, uncovering their unique paths, the challenges they've faced, and passions that continue to drive them. Whether you're a seasoned coach, an aspiring one, or simply somebody who likes listening to stories of how people achieve the success that they have, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired by the powerful stories and insights from the world of coaching. This is Behind the Knowledge. Let's jump in.
All right, we are back on another episode of Behind the Knowledge. Once again with my co-host, Mr. Pat Barber, the manimal in the house. And we are very honored and excited to have John Singleton on the podcast today. He is the owner and founder, creator of the Progrm. You've been in the space forever as far as CrossFit is concerned. I feel like I've seen your name since, 2010, 2011? How long have you been in the space? And just tell us a little bit about your coaching journey.
Yeah, I mean, I started like in around 2006, 2007. So watching videos of Pat was my inspiration in the sport.
I am so sorry.
But yeah, it's been, the decades kind of get close to adding up, which is always scary.
Now, did you have any coaching experience before you got involved in CrossFit?
Yeah, so my kind of first real passion, I always loved sports, just any kind of sport. But my first kind of passion was martial arts. And in the martial arts world that I was in, it was quite common that you would coach or lead kind of other groups or beginners coming in. So from a young age, like 16 years old, I was coaching groups or helping people out. So it's always been a part of that journey. And then
that seems like a big part of martial arts. Like there's in a lot of martial arts, it's like that graduation from as soon as you like get to a place of knowledge, there's like almost like a duty to pass along that knowledge to the folk. How did they determine that in martial arts, out of curiosity?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's kind of there's lots of different strands of martial arts, but especially from Asia. So you got these Japanese and Chinese styles. And one thing that's quite interesting there is the lineage is very important. So who you were, your kind of trainer or coach or the person that you've learned from is very important. You respect their lineage. And I think a lot of that gets passed down. So it's an honor to be taught by a certain person. And then you kind of hold that honor of teaching then on to the next one and continuing their lineage and what they've taught down through the roots. So, and you're completely right. It's just, through a lot of them, through a judo, or however it may be, the black belts will teach the belts lower down or help with the white belts. So it's just a structure they've incorporated. And I think it helps. There's a big part of coaching, I think, that can help your own development as well. And so they've understood that and used it to move it on.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just like going off a tangent here. I wonder how intentional that was, like as a culture to set that into play, or if it was just a byproduct of the fact that the lineage stuff was important in general in that culture. Because I'm wondering if you could manufacture that in the fitness space, like because of the style of I don't know, just because of the style of how we adopt coaches from within our own culture. Could we do that within our spaces? It seems like it'd be cool.
Would argue that we kind of do. We've talked a lot about on this podcast and talking to other coaches that they've developed most of their style and become high-level coaches because they had other examples that they copied and followed in. And that sounds pretty similar to me.
Yeah, I think that there's also maybe an interesting fact, back in the day, these people would be wiped out through war or through fighting. And so actually there was a more direct need to pass something on quite quickly. Whereas in this, in our environment now, luckily we don't face those same challenges. But I've not looked into kind of the historic reason why, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was something like that. There's, you could just be wiped out quite quickly. So there's like a quite quick urge to pass on what you've learned to help the next generation coming through.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry to derail your story, but so you come up through martial arts, you start coaching via that process, and then where does it go from there?
Yeah, so I was involved in a few things, but I was doing a master's degree of osteopathy in London, and I think I was quite lucky. Then the competition scene was very new. Like, my first competition I ever did was with Sam Briggs, and this was before Sam Briggs was the games winner. You know, she was just at this low. They were called sectional events back then, and I just started getting exposed to really high level, what are now really high level CrossFit athletes. You know, I was kind of learning osteopathy, which was a big part, seeing if I could help them manage injuries. I was also really interested in the coaching part. I wanted to be an athlete myself. And it's just a bit of a perfect mix of learning everything CrossFit that I could, and also getting to work with these great athletes and just learn from them, like learn what kind of volume could they handle. When we first started CrossFit, the workout of the day was like, you know, it was just crazy high. Do one workout a day, you'd lie on the floor, and it'd be crazy to think about doing a double session. And then, you know, it kind of gets introduced that all of a sudden some people are training twice a day. You're like, whoa, you know,
You're like, pardon me, excuse me, twice a day? Okay,
How's that possible? Yeah.
Seems stupid, but sure, whatever. Yeah, I remember.
And so there's just been this, like, that I think the sport's evolved quite a lot. I mean, if you look back in 10 years ago, what athletes are doing and what they're capable of, and how certain things have progressed, it's been quite a big evolution to see. And also the knowledge base within the sport has grown a lot as well.
A ton. And I'm curious, what year did you do your level 1?
I'm going to say probably around 2008, 2009, something like that.
And where did you do it, and who taught it? Do you remember?
It was in London with Chuck Carswell was the flow master. She someone asked this question the other day, and it was maybe a couple of years later, I did my level 2, and they hadn't really worked out, because level 1 was so popular, and they were like, hey, what do we do now? You know, we need something else. So I did this level 2, and they weren't really sure when I did my level 2, really what the level 2 was. They were like, hey, it needs to be kind of involved with coaching. And we had Adrian Bosman came in the UK for that one. And it was just a really fun experience. There's no test at the end of the level 2. It was just, you kind of help people out coaching. But it was, I would say back then, there was just a really strong sense of community. It was like you'd found this thing that not many people knew about. And it was just kind of really, it felt very special to be a part of it. And I was like all in.
It was like counterculture. It was different. It was new. And there was like it felt like a select group. I'm with you there. Now, when you started coaching, did you start just at an affiliate? Did you immediately start trying to work with athletes that were trying to compete? Like, what did that look like?
So back when I started, there was only one affiliate in London, and that was quite far away. Me and a friend who I'm sure Pat knows, Yami Tikkanen.
So never heard of him. So I know Yami, but whatever you just said, that word, the second one, no idea.
So Yami and I actually studied together. Okay. So we were at university during this whole period, and Yami and I, we would go into the park, like run around the park, do some kettlebell swings, and like climb up. Actually, that was like our experience, and it basically just became this like really healthy competitiveness. Like we'd get up, we'd read the journal articles, we'd eat our paleo pancakes because carbs are evil, and then run around, and so that was with how everything kind of emerged, and that was the history there. I've talked so much I lost track of the question as well.
just when you started coaching, so you started training with Yami, and you started coaching. Did you start because there was an affiliate close by? Did you start coaching people in the park with you guys?
Yeah. So the first basically that we actually helped start up an affiliate called CrossFit Central London, and it was in this tiny place, and we just be there like kind of in the mornings, helping out, give classes before university. And honestly, the progression, because we both wanted to be athletes ourselves, I think the games was always seen as very aspirational. Like, you wanted to compete, you wanted to go to the games. So it was always a part of that the byproduct of doing what you're doing, you kind of either want to go there ourselves as athletes or be able to help athletes going there. And that was really the journey for me until like 2014. And then 2014, I then made the decision, okay, I realized that I'm not going to make it as where I want to go as an athlete. But I really want to be able to help athletes progress, and I feel like I can offer them something. And that's when I made the decision to become like full-time coaching just high level athletes. And I, it was kind of always weird for me to be competing against someone you were coaching. There was like always this weird dynamic. So for me, having that clarity made things easy at the time.
If I asked you what your strengths were as a competitor when you were trying to compete, what would you say?
So I had through boxing and whatnot. I was always kind of relatively well conditioned. So light and like kind of 20-minute time domain was my jam. Actually, I had like the first ever open announcement. It was like first ever open work. I was like light snatches and double unders.
Mm-hmm.
And because of boxing and martial arts, like holy moly, that was my jam. I mean, I think I got like one of the best scores. But then they had like some trouble with the leaderboard or something messed up. So they actually had to repeat it the next week, and then my score kept going lower. I was like, oh no. But yeah, so like workouts like that were always what I was good at. I always struggled with strength, and I just couldn't build up the numbers to be competitive strength wise.
Got it. You sound a lot like Todd to me.
I was going to say you're the complete polar opposite of Pat. Pat was good. If it was 2 minutes and heavy, we're all set. If it's 20 minutes and light, no chance.
Yeah. How tall are you and what do you weigh? I'm just out of curiosity. Like when you were competing.
Yeah, so just doing the pounds conversion. So centimeter, like 183 centimeters, which is like 6'1", 6'2", so quite tall for most. And then I currently weigh like 90 kilos. But back then I was probably actually quite a bit lighter, like 85, 84 on that side.
Got it. So that makes sense. That makes sense where you'd excel where you did, especially with your background and whatnot. So that's awesome. So who was the first like competitors that you started training? Like, how did you have that conversation, or was it just people at your gym? Like, what did that look like? And how did you get in there once you made that transition of like, hey, you know what? I'm going to be just a coach.
Yeah. So I've been working like with quite a lot of regional level athletes, in different places. I lived in Argentina for a period, so also coached in, or I was part of a team and coached in CrossFit Toluca, and then been helping out and working with regional level athletes. And then at the end of 2014, beginning of 2015, and then Sarah Sigmundsdottir and Björgvin came onto the team and started to help them. And obviously 2015, Sarah podiumed, Björgvin podiumed, and that was obviously like a marked difference. A lot of athletes. We had some up and coming athletes as well that would then do well in the previous years, like with Adrian Mundvila, Lucas Esslinger. We had like a big list of names behind, and that really then set in motion working with games athletes.
Awesome. And then I'm just out of curiosity, did you start the training plan first the program first, or did Yami start the training plan first?
So Yami had the training plan. So when we came out of university, Yami was on seminar staff and started working that way. And I went to a clinic because we both graduated as osteopathy. But I went to work in a clinic and he went to work mainly on seminar staff. And he started up the training plan and working around. And then probably, I want to say, I could be wrong, but maybe around 2011, 2012 that started
Okay.
up.
Okay. And then when did the program start?
2015. So after that's when we then had the success from people. It's the classic way. Lots of people are asking what we're doing, how we're working, and everything was very underground at that stage. And then in 2015 is when we then officially launched what became the program.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, I think your name is better. Just throwing it out there. I mean, it's just good. Like, I love Yami. Great. The training plan's awesome too, but the program, it's short. It's like, it's to the point. I'm in. Like,
you'll know a funny story of how it started. So we was obviously working with Sarah at the time, and obviously inspired by like Miko Salo and things like that. And the Sisu documentary, again, was this really big inspirational thing. So we're thinking, okay, what can we call our training program? And there's an Icelandic word called elkmur, which apparently is a very similar meaning to Sisu. So we say, like, people to ask about the program, oh, what's it called? Like, elkmur. And like, elkmur, what? Elkmur. And we're like, oh, just the program. And so eventually we're like, hey, we'll just call it the program because no one can say this thing anyway. And that's where the name came from.
Nice. I'm going to call my next program Elk Mode.
That's the word. ELKMODE. Elk Mode, baby. We're going for it. Americanize it. That's perfect. Exactly. Now, obviously, the program has evolved a lot from simply working with high-level games level athletes or regional level athletes, and you offer options and plans for all levels of fitness, right? So what does that look like now? What is the program look like currently?
We are definitely like a whole team now. We have like a number of coaches on board. We have people helping with back-end tasks. We have people who help with our social media. So it really has emerged into a lot more company structure than me just writing workouts and sending them out on an email. It's like that evolution has had quite a lot. And I think a big part of that is, when we also started, there wasn't mayhem, proven hard work pays off. And those guys have obviously like really upped what is needed in the training space in order to have a successful program. And we've wanted to remain relevant in the space. And so that's meant we've had to do all of these things.
So if we ask what your like general training philosophy for the program is, like what is it you stand behind in terms of, hey, we do this, for these people, or we do this for these people, like what would you say you do in terms of your training philosophy and what goes on there?
So I think in the philosophy side of things, I think one thing that we're very good at is managing the variance that a CrossFit athlete needs. So I think that can be a really complex thing in programming. You've got to get someone good at strength, someone good at conditioning, someone good at gymnastics, and then all the components of those things. And I think with some of the principles that we apply, being able to give the athlete the variance that they need to improve, but not overloading them for their specific level. And then we realized, obviously, that not everyone can train like an elite athlete and do what they want to do, but they still want to, they still enjoy going through that process and doing kind of similar to what an elite athlete may do. And that's where the programming then started to evolve. And I also like to think, an analogy I've sometimes used to describe it is when the Formula One teams, or say SpaceX or whatever, the technology that they kind of use and develop for focusing on these very specific tasks becomes helpful all the way down. And I think a part of that helped with helping more everyday athletes as well. So the details that you need to help an elite athlete become extremely proficient at the ring muscle up or barbell cycling, or you just look at it in such detail that then you can start to take some of those principles and use it to help the more everyday athlete as well as we come through. So I do think that there is some use in like kind of working with the elites and then being able to transition that onto the everyday from a technical perspective. You know, obviously it's a whole different world coaching a class and keeping that engagement, but from the technical side of things, I think there's some good transfer there.
Is there anything that's changed in terms of your philosophy with regards to programming from when you started in 2015 and really registered your thing to now? Has there been an evolution of, you know, okay, hey, we were trying these kinds of things, they weren't really working, to, hey, they are working now, or blah, 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 or even some of the stuff that you were doing with the elites, like you're saying, that you brought down to more training with normal individuals? Has there been a change there?
Are you a CrossFit coach who's feeling stuck in their development? You're not alone. Many coaches lack good guidance when it comes to how to develop as a coach. They either don't have strong examples they find themselves around, they may lack support from their gym owner, and they just feel unprepared going into their next credential. That's why we made the Knowledge Pro, to fill that gap. It's a mentorship program built for coaches like you. It uses the Knowledge Daily, our comprehensive video library, as well as extra content that we put directly into the Knowledge Pro on our live weekly calls twice a week to mentor you and get you to the next level of development. We've got progressions, we've got scales, we've got one-off tips and tricks, we've got full coached classes by level 4 coaches so you can see an example of what it means to do this job well. All of that will also be walked through each week on those live calls, so that you have a soundboard to bounce off of and a group of coaches looking to be better to help support you in your endeavors. Coaching isn't just knowing what to do, it's also knowing how to do it. And that takes 2 things. 1, an example, and 2, practice. Practice is on your end, you got to go out there and do it. We can help provide that example and the support with the Knowledge Pro. If you want to know more, click the link below and give the Knowledge Pro a shot. I look forward to seeing you on one of the next calls.
Yes, I think that there was a bit of a volume era of CrossFit. And so back in the day, like Sam Briggs, Sarah, I don't know Rich as well, but from what I've heard and seen, like the volume that those guys would handle was like just pretty crazy. And what that then allowed us to do was then obviously you could program at a really high level, high volume, high intensity, high load, and they would keep responding. And so then if you take that away to another athlete that, you know, doesn't respond, it kind of beats them into the ground way too much. And so because we were, you know, what we'd seen work with Sarah, for example, you know, just thinking that would then work with another athlete wasn't true. And so then we had to kind of dial back and learn to become a lot more individualized with the athlete's needs and their qualities. And I think probably that's the biggest thing, is the individual nature of this, and how different athletes respond to different stimuli is really important to understand and take into appreciation. That you can't just take something that's worked for one athlete and use it across all the other athletes, because it just isn't the case.
How do you typically,
I think that is.
How do you typically go about figuring that out with an individual athlete? Is there a way that you kind of, if it's an elite level athlete, that you onboard them by generally progressing through a series of workouts or something like that to get an idea of how much volume they can actually handle?
Yes. So let's say the athlete they haven't made it onto the scene, you don't know so much about them, then I think there is that exploration period of like, okay, you know, what can they handle? What will they respond to? It's definitely a quality of an elite level CrossFit athlete to be able to handle volume. And so if the athlete can handle that, and you kind of, you know, you need to explore a little, okay, you know, if we give them 3 workouts a day, are they going to respond well? They're going to recover well, feel well the next day, or actually is it just going to beat them up? And so some of the athletes are a bit more, they don't handle the volume as well, even though they're like really high level competitors. And so you have to be a lot more careful in terms of what you give them and protect them a lot more, and make sure when they get to the competition that their body's in as good a shape. Whereas some of these guys are just like, I mean, they're just impressive individuals that respond to pretty much anything you give them. And I would say that it's probably one of the qualities that makes like the some of the greatest athletes in the world. And you do have to understand a little bit about that. And I think this is an interesting thing. Like, how do you optimize the athlete that, say, does get a bit beaten down, doesn't handle the volume well? How can we optimize that and to get the best out of them? And then when you've got someone who just responds to everything, well, you know you've got something very special. I do think there are ways to optimize that and make sure it's done in a safe and effective way. But I think especially for a games athlete, that's a quality that's very important.
Yeah, I mean, I'd argue that that's what's one of the biggest differences between the top and the almost top are, and then a huge difference between the people who are at the games and the people who don't quite make it is like who don't quite make it and who make it. I think there's been a good customization of exactly what that person needs in order to excel in the competitive space. And that's different depending on how that person responds to volume. But I think between the top and like the just below that is that top is, I would argue most of them are genetically predisposed to recovering quicker. You know, like they can handle volume better than most. And then you throw on that like good work ethic and then an intelligent coach. Like, I mean, just in my experience, knowing people like Jason, knowing people like Rich, knowing people who, you know, even Matt, like all of them, even like you could throw anything at them and they would recover. Like they would recover like it was not fair. And I was like, hey, that's bullshit. Whereas, you know, someone who is myself, like I could beat them in things, but then it was like, you give me too much volume, I break. And I was never going to be the top 5, no matter how precise I was. But then I think I love how you're thinking about it though, is like, you can still get the most out of an athlete, like me, for instance, where you would tailor like, okay, we're going to play with this, pushing things here and pulling back here. And, you know, like that I think is where like a good coach will step in and do some amazing shit. Cause I think some top level coaches just got genetic freaks and we're like, give him everything. And it's like, check out how well he did.
Yeah,
and you're like,
look
yeah,
at how good
no
I am.
shit.
Yeah.
Like,
I would have done good with anybody and anything.
Totally. So how do you, I mean, is there a time frame that you look at for when you get a new athlete that's kind of looking to aspire to that, to start overloading them and giving them more? And then like, what are some signs maybe you look for to see if they're overtraining or if you're giving them too much? Like, how do you go about doing that for the individuals that you coach?
So I think one thing I think in recovery, there's also this thing with adaptability, and they're just high responders to, again, the strength. So if you're giving this person, you know, let's say you want to try and work on their strength and like, you know, okay, well, next week the numbers look easy. Next week the numbers look easy. And with these high responders, things happen very quickly. Like you hear some of Fraser's training logs, you know, like he takes 3 weeks off, or doesn't train anything until the open. The first open workout feels horrendous. Second one feels a bit better. And then the third one, he's kind of back into shape. And it can be true with athletes as well. Like, you know, my strength realistically has not improved despite what I've done over all these years. Maybe I've been a bit stronger or a bit weaker, and that's with like strength cycles, non-strength cycles. So I've kind of always been at this plateau. So I think for a coach looking at me, they'd be like, well, this is where his kind of strength limit is. Is this enough or not enough? Because it's really hard to make a significant breakthrough. And often at times, if you have to sacrifice so many other things in order to break through, is it worth it? Because you start losing your conditioning, you lose your gymnastics capacity as well. But yes, I would say this, that the quicker they respond to the stimulus, the better the sign that they will continue improving.
Right.
I'm curious to know how you've taken this information and realizing that not everybody can handle the same amount of volume and having to cater that to the different individuals, especially at that elite level. How have you taken that concept and applied it to the more beginner athletes or intermediate athletes or the people outside of the elite?
Yeah, so I think we kind of we do change the philosophy a little bit. So the exploration of how much they can handle is almost done in a reverse way. We know that there's a boundary and a limit to where they can go, and we don't want to get to that boundary or limit too quickly, because I think at this lower end, the consistency becomes really important. If they go in the gym for a few weeks and then get injured and then don't train for a whole another month, they might move on to another sport. They might end up doing something else. So actually, we found that starting very slowly, very gradually, and then building up over a longer period of time leads to more consistent success. And so we take a lot more patient approach, is maybe not the right use of words, but our idea is not necessarily to explore these physical boundaries, but actually to get them consistent at the start and then move from there.
Love that.
Yeah, that's great.
Obviously, that's in line with the charter that we preach at the level 1, right? Of starting mechanics, consistency, and then intensity, right? It's like taking that same concept to the entire approach of training and thinking of that low trajectory to a distant horizon of overall fitness for people who aren't the elite. So I love that.
I also think that like that consistency component is like a big problem for a lot of people who pretend to want to be competitors. Not only consistency in training, but like consistency in the training that they're doing. So like they'll like the psychology between the people who I know were really at the top and the people who were kind of just, yeah, I want to compete, but then they would switch from program to program to program to program. There was no consistency with the methodology they were even using or the framework that they were using. So they might be consistent in their volume of training, but it was never with one thing for very long. And it's like that. I think like to get a true sense of what's going on, you do need to be extremely consistent. And like speaking to that and having someone stick to your things, I think is huge. So I respect the hell out of making sure that consistency is there with any sort of program, and that you note that kind of right out the gate. That's cool.
Where do you spend the majority of your time currently? Do you work more so one-on-one with high-level athletes? Do you create that programming? Do you spend more time with the plans for the more intermediate or beginner athletes?
It's a good question. I think in the last couple of years I've transitioned from more of this in-person working time with the athletes to with more people on the team becomes a lot more dynamics. And you start to realize again that there's like a learning process of helping people on the team, making sure everyone's moving in the right direction. And with me doing that and working with the athletes, it became again a bit too much. So we now have like a strong coaching team in place that takes a lot of that coaching load, and I have a lot of faith in them. And then it allows me to be doing more things like this, like talking about what I want to talk to, or really just like spending time on calls with the teams or answering messages. It just takes up a long time of the day, and it didn't allow me to give the time that's needed to the athletes. One thing I've always thought is that this is the strange thing in the space. So how do you get paid as an elite CrossFit coach? And you didn't, so there's no money in the space. You had to build a business. The program came about in 2014 or 2015 when Sarah had come third, Björgen had come third. I went back to Spain, and literally I'd put all my money into going to the games to help the guys. I came back and didn't have enough money to pay rent. I was like, shit, what do I do? And luckily enough, I organized a training camp, and some guys came over, and I covered the first rent. But it was really, really nothing. You need to. Then I had this realization that actually you need to start a business. Or back in that day, you need to start a business in order to fund your coaching of working with the athletes, in order to be able to do it full time because of those demands. And so that's kind of where that process came in. And one of the things I feel happy about now is being able to give opportunities to coaches that they can just focus full time on coaching, which is really what I wanted to do. If you'd have gone to John, here's your salary, you focus on working with these athletes, I'd be like, yes. And not necessarily having to worry about all this other side stuff going on. And I think now that's a bit of the structure that's come into place, that you don't have to worry so much financially about that. And a lot of people wouldn't take that risk. It's not a very sensible risk to take.
No, that's a really dumb risk, but I love how you did it.
Yeah, that's what I'd be curious to hear. It's like you come back, you've just achieved something that's great, getting both these athletes on the podium, and then you don't have enough money. Did you ever reconsider, like, hey, is this the right thing to do? Like, leaning farther into it seems like that's a stretch, where it probably could have been easier to be like, hey, I've got this education, I can go do this other thing to where I can actually make money and pay my rent.
Yeah, I think for better or for worse, I've always been very passion driven. And it's funny that it's kind of funny that it was never a question in my mind of not doing that, of taking the sensible route. To me, it was like, I loved the experience. I loved being there. Like when we got to Carson, just seeing the Friday night lights, the full tennis stadium, man, I was like, there was no question in my mind that I didn't want to be back there, and I didn't want to be doing that again. I just had to find you have these basics of life, like eating food and paying rent, to have a roof over your head. So yeah, it was never a question. It's if anything, it's not been an easy journey to get here now, but I'm very thankful to be here now and have the experiences that I've had within the sport. Like, it's some of the best memories of my life have been those moments of like watching an athlete on the tennis stadium floor, Friday night lights, or seeing them achieve. It's something that's really I've been very passionate about. And even still, I get excited. We started this competition called the Crown, and one of the inspirations for that competition was like watching Pat at Lake Tahoe throw down when Rogue versus Again Faster. Like I really did love that old school stuff of CrossFit, and it's something that's always resonated with me.
I hear that same thing all the time in our community, right? People get so passionate about CrossFit in general, about coaching, about helping people. What kind of advice would you have to people that are that passionate but just can't figure out a way to financially make it work right off the bat? Any guidance for coaches that want to work with just an affiliate with elite athletes? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I think there's two routes. Like I think the elite athlete world has kind of formed. There's like training programs, training camps, and so there is more structure where you can kind of fast track some of that stuff. Where you can get an opportunity to go work in one of the training programs, whichever one it may be. Kind of apprentice, be able to see what has worked for the athletes and what not, and learn from that. All those years of mistakes that we've made, you can kind of learn from and fast track, and I think that's just a very sensible way to do it. Like, I'm trying to build up something for yourself. Like it's very hard for us to be kind of competitive or stay relevant with the big training programs. Like a lot of our athletes, they going to Mayhem to train with Rich or Proven or whatever it may be. It's hard for us to kind of maintain and keep going. So for then someone coming in new, it's like an even bigger obstacle to overcome.
Yeah. If I asked you, because you've hired coaches and you've brought them up under your wing, I think it's interesting in the space. There's like programmers who like program stuff, and then there's coaches who, in my mind, coaching is eliciting change in the person who's in front of them. So you can elicit change via a program, that's a thing, but there's also like a sense of like being on the floor and eliciting change via movement. So for like the general CrossFit coach, that's what it means to be a coach. But for the competitive space, the term coach has really been co-opted by programmers. Would you say that there is much of a difference between just being a programmer or being like a programmer coach, or being like when you bring people on, what are you looking for? Because like, what makes a good programmer, coach, person that you would like trust to then help your athletes?
I think it's a great observation. And I don't think something that people are aware of. It's something that I've thought about quite a lot, that you can be a great programmer and a really bad coach, and vice versa. You know, that does exist. And I think for what we do, we need both. We need someone who's just really good with people. Like, honestly, like the elite level and the same way down, your relationship with the athlete is really important. Like, you can be the most knowledgeable guy. You could also help the athlete, guy or girl, you can help the athlete to get to where they need to be with the knowledge set that you have. But if you can't create that human connection with them, then it's all lost. You know, if you don't get on, if you don't understand that emotional need or that bond, then it doesn't matter, because you haven't got the human connection, which is also so important. The programming side is a little bit like that, but just from a different way. You need to be able to adapt to the athlete's needs, wants, and desires, but just from the back end. But it's obviously less interactive from that regard. So for what we do need good programmers. There's a lot of volume of programming that we have to get through each week, and it needs a specific type of person who's just good at that. Like, some people, it's an interesting thing. Like, some people can just sit down and write a program. Whereas some people, like, you write one workout and they're like, oh, what's this thing? And they get so easily distracted. And it's quite a big difference. If you're not the type of person that can, like, sit down and get a programming done, then starting to write that stuff will get really time consuming each week.
It's such a heavy lift on my brain, and my wife is the opposite. She's the one who can sit down and just go like here's a month of programming that works perfectly with itself. And I'm like, okay, I did one workout in that time and I'm fucking exhausted. But this workout, it's super good.
So cool.
You know, like
the best one workout ever. Yeah.
Well, so it sounds like you look for a balance between those two, someone who can, or even like hiring two kind of different types of people, one who can help with programming a lot and kind of like structure that whole thing out, and another person who can deliver it really well. I guess the golden would be like a person who could do both. And those are hard to find.
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily know. And the like in-person coaching, like, I'm sure you see this for, you know, someone who can coach and lead a workshop, like to be able to deliver a level 1, for example, you keep a crowd entertained, you keep them engaged, able to deliver knowledge. Then working one-to-one with someone is then also this different skill where some people actually might work really good one-to-one, but don't handle the group well, and the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for where we are now, it's actually good having the different qualities and then being able to bring those together. We don't necessarily need it all in one person because of the team aspect that we have. Yeah,
that is the beauty of it. And then trying to also see where you struggle and get better. It's actually, you just reminded me of something that I found really interesting when I was observing coaches who would start to come to the newer level 2s that could coach the small groups, but as soon as you were in one-on-one, they were terrible. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? It's like they could manage a small group, they could see and correct in a small group, but you put them one-on-one and they were like, okay, do it, you're done. And then they'd walk away. And I was like, what is happening? And what I realized is that a lot of coaches in today's CrossFit spaces were a member at the gym, they go take their level 1 and they jump into a 12-person class coaching. And so they never got one-on-one experience, where like old school coaches, you started with one-on-ones because that was just like what you did. And you built that rapport, and it was almost this natural, okay, you build the rapport with one-on-one, you learn how to handle that relationship, then you go on to the next one, versus like nowadays where they just jump into a big class and they learn how to navigate that relatively decently, but never build those one-on-one skills. So it harkens back to you fail at the margins of your experience. Like, what you haven't done, you're not going to be that great at. and exposing yourself to the thing coaching wise that you're not very good at is always beneficial in all regards. Do you, what are you currently working on right now? What are some of your big projects that you got going on, or what are some of the things that you got, like what's your vision for the next year, next few months? What are you working on?
Yes, the tragedy that happened at the games with Lazar has obviously raised a lot of unexpected questions on the sports space, especially. And I think anyone who follows that sees a lot of divide, and it's just a weird time right now. And a lot of athletes feel that. Do I want to compete in what I've been doing in the season, or do I not? And so we're obviously being so close to the athletes, kind of helping to navigate or give any help or advice where we can. So that's left an interesting space. Typically this time of year, it's hey, focus on the off season. We know the off season competitions are coming up. We know we're going to have some kind of open quarterfinal, semi-final games process going on. So there's not too much changes. Whereas now it's a bit more up in the air. One big project we do have is this crown competition that we run. So this is something that we did since 2019. It was the first year we did it. But the focus is on giving the next generation of the up and coming athletes of the sports. We do now a series competition and then have a final. And that's been something really fun for us to be able to do and be a part of. So that's definitely one of our bigger projects that we have outside of working with the athletes.
How do people find that, and how do they get involved in the crown stuff?
Just if you put if you search the Crown CrossFit on Google, will come up, or on the Instagram handles the Progrm Crown. But if anyone's we kind of saw in the space, there's a bit of a lack of something for the next generation who come up. It's you finish the teen games and then there's this huge jump to get into the elites, and there's really nothing in between. And I think a lot of athletes get lost, go on to do something else, and hey, what can we do to help transition across? And this is, over the years, we've evolved this Crown series and Crown finals that that group of athletes can be a part of.
I love it.
Nice.
I love it. That's awesome. They've needed a stage for a while. I think fostering that up and coming generation, because there is quite a big gap between actually not a big gap between some of those teen athletes and the other thing, but it's just there's
more on the men's side, right? The bigger gap there. Ladies' side, it seems to be a little bit easier to navigate.
I would say there's a worrying pattern on the female side. Obviously, you have Mal O'Brien, who's kind of 30. You have Emma Kerry, Sophie, I believe, is another girl who transitioned, and also Emma Lawson this year said about struggling with the mental issues before the season. That's a worrying number and a worrying pattern of elite young females in our space who are not transitioning well into the sport. And I think it's sad that though they're not there, because they're so inspirational for that kind of next generation that are coming through, because they're more relatable because of their age and see what they can achieve. And one of the hypotheses that we have is it's because it's just really hard to connect with someone who's, when you're 17, 18, someone who's 25, they're just living a very different life and don't have that same shared experience. In a lot of sports, football, golf, tennis, you've known people since you were 9 years old. You've had all these shared experiences. Even though you're competing with them, you might say, oh, this sucks, and oh yeah, it does suck. And you kind of have this shared experience, and we kind of believe that because there's this big gap, there's not that same connection in that generation.
That's an interesting perspective. My brain doesn't go there. My brain goes towards the platforms they're given with social media and how big those are, and the nature of the industry that we're in. Because we're in health and fitness, which is generally centered around physique and appearance versus physiological capability. So they get put into a health and fitness social platform. They're being judged based off of the standards of modern beauty. and then given 500,000 people following him, who are a lot of them uncouth turdburglars, and then they're 17 and going through psychological changes, and then they've got grown ass human beings constantly tearing them down on what they look like, how garbage they are, bad comments, like all those kinds of stuff. And it's just, to me, I mean, it speaks to a larger mental health thing with the access that has been given to them. But I see what you're saying too. Like if they were going through that and then also had support, they had like, hey, I'm 25 now and I've gone through this. I'm 30 now and I've gone through this. Like if they had that deeper connection, it'd be a much easier thing to work through in terms of, hey, this is what I'm experiencing right now. I mean, that's it. I like that perspective on it. And I love how you're trying to create a space for that.
I think if you think of a lot of the younger athletes in the sports, that they usually, it's like there's like one athlete of a younger age who's good at the gym, and then they end up hanging out with their parents or older athletes that are there, and they don't have, because unfortunately there's not the same number of athletes that age doing the sport of CrossFit. It's just a smaller demographic, and hopefully, if that demographic could improve over time, it's just beneficial for everyone in the space.
Yeah, totally agree with that. That's awesome. We don't want to keep you too long. We don't want to run the rest of your life. I do, by the way, I'd like to point out that Todd's in my screen, Todd's like art on the back of his wall connects with the art on your wall. So like, I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but it comes through and doot, and I'm like, holy criminy, we planned that. That's how we're doing it.
They both got smiley faces too, man. I like that. That's cool.
Do yours glow? Do they like glow in the dark? Yours?
They do not. They do not.
Okay.
Hey, fun fact, John. That is Todd's art. He actually does it himself. He is he's a good artist who started late in life and crushes it. And I'm not joking. I'm actually serious. He's actually good.
You guys, you're both very skillful. Pat with the building of domes, Todd with art. It's some good qualities.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, we do what we can. John, is there anything, like if you were looking back on it, that you'd like to go back and change, or if there's a fond memory that pops to your head, or if like you got advice for up and coming coaches, is there something there that you look back on and you go like, hey, I'd like to pass this forward, or I wish I would have done this differently, or anything like that?
Yeah, there's, I think with the experience that I have where I am now, there's a lot of things that I would have done differently. But they've shaped the experiences that I have now. I mean, I suppose we've spoken about it quite a lot, but yeah, going into the tennis stadium in Carson is definitely there. Like seeing the sun setting, seeing it was just full. I mean, people were standing up all around, and just seeing the floor the way it was lit. They're very fond memories for me, actually. Going out to California, which for us in Europe was this mystical place, having watched all the videos, CrossFit videos that had been done there. So yeah, it was definitely a fond memory.
Yeah, I think it sounds like find something you're passionate about, chase it for a while, see where it takes you, is what you're saying. Because you can find yourself in an awesome place.
It's you could. It's maybe not the best life advice I'd give to everyone, but I have enjoyed following my passion.
Yeah,
love it, man.
Well, hell
That's
yeah,
great.
man. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Where can everybody find you if they want to find your programs, find information on you, have a chat, whatever it is? Where can they find you?
Just search for the Progrm and we'll come up somewhere. It's the Progrm without an A, which is purely because we didn't have the Instagram handle back in the day, so we took the A out and there it was. So no A in Progrm.
There it is. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll let you go. I'll hit end on the recording, and au revoir, my friend.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Behind the Knowledge. Now, if you want help developing your coaching and to learn from us directly, check out the Knowledge Pro. There we host live calls with our coaches every week where we discuss content together and work on skills to improve our on-the-floor coaching ability. To learn more, you can head over to besthouroftheirday.com/the-knowledge. And if you found this content helpful, we're going to be releasing new episodes every week, so subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.